And speak to Eylon Levy, who's an Israeli government spokesperson. Thank you for being with us on the programme. Our correspondent there is saying at the moment there are few details about how this evacuation of babies will be carried out. What can you tell us about how it will work and how you will get those 37 babies out of that hospital?
It's been a month now since Israel started urging the population in northern Gaza to evacuate south for their safety because Hamas has embedded itself so deeply in populated areas. In the last few days, we've seen the IDF helping to evacuate civilians from inside hospitals, including places where they were being held as human shields by Hamas. Just on the weekend, we announced that Israel had actually killed a terrorist who had been holding 1,000 Palestinians hostage at the Al-Rantisi hospital and then facilitated an evacuation corridor for them to leave. And then our troops came under attack as they were securing safe passage for the Palestinians to leave. So yesterday, doctors at the hospital above the Shifa terror compound, this is the hospital where Hamas's headquarters are in the basement, asked our army to help facilitate an evacuation. The east side of the hospital is currently free. The hospital hasn't been entirely surrounded, and our troops are committed to help get them out of harm's way, despite knowing that on previous occasions over the weekend, when we've facilitated safe passage for Palestinians from hospitals, our troops have actually been attacked by Hamas as we tried to protect civilians.
You repeatedly say that Hamas is operating from those tunnels underneath the hospital. You call it there the Al-Shifa terror complex, in your words. How then will you be able to get in, to get those babies out of the hospital?
You're right, this is an incredibly difficult situation, and it pains us that when Israel urged civilians to evacuate a month ago, Hamas told them to stay. It pains us that international agencies didn't help to facilitate the evacuation of civilians and set up field hospitals while there was still time a month ago.
Because they say it is not safe for those people to be able to leave. And you'll look at these images and we're seeing those babies, 10 of those babies who need incubators in that hospital at Al-Shifa. It is not easy for them to make a journey of any description, never mind across an area that is being faced with intense bombardment by your forces.
You're right, it's not easy, it's very difficult.
And that is why they have not evacuated.
And that is why our troops are securing safe passage for them to leave, despite our troops coming under attack from Hamas. Let me just say a word about the situation about the electricity at the Al-Shifa hospital. Al-Shifa has electricity, it has fuel, and we know that because Hamas's headquarters are located in the basement. And the fact that they're still breathing and haven't suffocated in their tunnels means they have the fuel to ventilate those tunnels. We've already declassified intelligence showing that Hamas in fact leaches fuel from the same reservoirs that are supposed to supply the hospital. So we know that Hamas is putting Palestinian civilians recklessly in harm's way by using them as human shields. Their whole strategy is based on human shields because they know that once the civilians are out of the way, there is nothing to stop Israeli soldiers destroying that infrastructure responsible for the October 7th massacre. So we're peeling away their layers of human shields. We're putting our own soldiers in harm's way, boots on the ground, to evacuate the innocent Palestinian civilians being held as human shields. And we would expect the international community to support those efforts as well, because we're doing the right thing by trying to get civilians to safety. This is a war against Hamas, which declared war on us with the October 7th massacre, not the Palestinian people, and the people on the ground know that.
Will your forces enter Al-Shifa hospital to help these babies get out?
I can't comment on specific operational matters and whether they're going to go in or the babies will be transferred to them outside, but we've stood up and said we're willing to provide the assistance that is necessary to get them out because we don't want innocent, vulnerable people to be caught in the crossfire, despite Hamas's best efforts to keep them in harm's way and use them as human shields.
Where will they be taken?
Well, for a month, we've been urging Palestinians in northern Gaza to evacuate south of the Gaza River for their safety. That's because northern Gaza is where Hamas has embedded most of its terror infrastructure. You know, our troops have been finding tunnel shafts underneath children's bedrooms, rocket launchers inside mosques. It's going to get dangerous there. So we're urging them to move to the south so that we can target Hamas and those legitimate military targets while getting civilians out of the way.
You say they will be taken somewhere safer to the south. Reports this morning that 13 Palestinians have been killed in an Israeli strike on a house in Khan Yunis. That is in the south of Gaza, the place that you say is safe.
Khan Yunis is also an area from which Hamas has been firing rockets at Israel.
It is where you have told a significant proportion of the population to evacuate for their own safety.
We have urged them to evacuate south to areas of relative safety. Specifically, we're urging them to move to a humanitarian area that has been designated in the southwest of the Gaza Strip, where international agencies will be able to deliver humanitarian aid. But you mentioned an important point. The fact that Hamas continues to fire rockets at Israeli towns and cities from inside densely populated areas puts these people in the way of harm. And we're doing everything we can in order to get civilians out of harm's way. But we're dealing with a genocidal terror group that is operating from inside densely populated areas. We didn't pick the battlefield. They picked the battlefield. And we're doing everything we can, upholding our obligations under international law to keep the other side's civilians safe. But we are dealing with a very dangerous enemy that has no compunctions about using civilians as human shields.
So you tell me that some areas of Khan Yunis are not deemed to be safe areas either. How about a UN centre? The UN telling us overnight that an Israeli strike on its facility in Gaza that was sheltering a number of civilians and its own staff came under attack, and this morning is reporting a significant number of deaths. Where in Gaza is safe for these people to go to?
I'm not familiar with that specific incident, but Hamas has a long and documented history of exploiting UN facilities, including schools, in order to hide its weapons, in order to hide its own terrorists. And anywhere where Hamas is operating and using them as bases for terrorism against Israel will, of course, be legitimate targets subject to the international principles of proportionality and distinction. And Hamas is putting these people in danger. We're urging the international community to help keep civilians safe by moving them away from Hamas. And I repeat, it is tragic that for the last month, Israel has been the only party trying to get civilians out of harm's way in northern Gaza, while Hamas has been urging them to stay, and the international community has been trying to obstruct Israel's best efforts to evacuate those civilians to areas where it will be less dangerous.
You'll understand why I'm pushing this point, Eylon, because it's a convenient response, isn't it, that every time there is an Israeli strike on some sort of facility inside Gaza, you just tell us that Hamas is operating there and that's why you're fighting back. We understand that.
I'm sorry. The
UN here, though, is saying that its facility, the UN, internationally recognised body, the UN says that its facility in Gaza was attacked by your forces overnight, and this morning reporting a significant number of deaths. The point is that is in contravention of international humanitarian law. And people need somewhere that is safe to go if you are telling them to evacuate from the north of Gaza.
I have to push back because the insinuation in your question is that Israel takes pleasure at taking pot shots at civilian facilities.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that every response you make to my suggestion that you are targeting people when they are trying to find somewhere safe to go is that you tell me Hamas is operating there. This is a UN facility.
Ben, Hamas has spent the last 16 years embedding itself underneath civilian areas in Gaza, building its headquarters under the hospital, exploiting ambulances, putting its own, our troops have just discovered rocket launchers and weapon silos inside schools, inside classrooms, next to children's bedrooms.
So that justifies attacking those targets, even though there are, as we've seen this morning, babies in the hospital. We've seen that innocent civilians are in the UN facilities.
And we are doing everything we can, going above and beyond our obligations under international law to get civilians out of harm's way. We are fighting Hamas like the world. 86 nations came together to destroy ISIS. Now, I don't remember British troops being on the ground in Mosul and Raqqa helping to facilitate civilians to get out of harm's way while ISIS terrorists were firing RPGs at them. But that is what our soldiers are doing. We are going above and beyond our obligations under international law to keep civilians safe. Unfortunately, we are dealing with a ruthless enemy that aims to maximize casualties on its own side in order to produce the sorts of images that gain it international sympathy and then would get pressure on Israel to stop defending itself and stop dismantling the terror state that perpetrated the October 7th massacre and is actively planning another one.
We've been reporting this morning of the pause in fighting to allow that humanitarian corridor to reopen. We've just lost those pictures of that right now, but we've been showing people a number of civilians making that journey on the road that you have allowed to be a safe passage. Talk to me about the significance of that safe route and whether you will agree to more of these temporary pauses to allow more people to leave.
These safe corridors are very important because we know that Hamas has been physically stopping people from leaving the northern Gaza Strip. As I said, its whole strategy is based on human shields. It knows that if it doesn't have civilians above them, the Israeli army will come under them. will come after them. That is why Hamas has been doing its best to keep civilians in harm's way. And our soldiers have been securing those safe corridors. They've been attacked by Hamas. Hamas has attacked, I mean, this is absurd. Hamas has attacked Israeli soldiers securing the safe passage of Palestinians from northern Gaza so that we can go after Hamas. And just yesterday, we saw that Israel had implemented a tactical pause in order to facilitate the evacuation of the Al-Shati area as well, where Hamas has embedded itself under civilian areas, again, because we do not want civilians to be hurt. We are going above and beyond our obligations to keep civilians out of harm's way, putting our own troops at significant risk in order to do so. And we call on all the civilians who remain in the northern Gaza Strip. There is no reason for you to be there a month after Israel started urging you to leave. This is an area where Hamas has embedded itself under your schools, under your homes, under your hospitals. It is going to get dangerous. We do not want you to get hurt. Please move south for your safety.
Eylon Levy, Israeli government spokesperson, thank you for being with us on BBC News today. It's good to talk to you. Thank you.